G'day painters, welcome back to Bellemar's Miniatures. Today I'm working on a Sorcerer in Terminator Armour. Let's get to it. Since the Thousand Suns range doesn't have a Sorcerer in Terminator Armour model, we need to make one. For this I'm going to start with Belial and kitbash him. I'm using his legs and body mostly as is. The first step will be removing his purity seals, since Chaos doesn't wear them. For his head, I'm removing the headdress part because I want to use a headdress from the Scarab Occult Terminator's kit. Makes him look more zinchy. This takes some dremeling to make it fit, mostly on the inside of his head cavity. I need to basically thin the walls a bit so the headdress part will slip in better. This took a while because I was going slow. I don't want to take too much off. Better to do it in small steps and be safe than take too much off and mess it up. Can't add it back in. Once I was happy with how the headdress would fit, I finished putting together the body. I'm leaving the headdress off for now, that can be attached later. The next modification is a different shoulder pad. I would have really liked to use one from the Scarab Occult kit, but the kit only gives enough shoulder pads to make 5 models, so that would have meant one of my Occult Termies ended up without a shoulder pad. So I ended up going with the shoulder pad from the Exalted Sorcerer's kit. It doesn't fit well, it's too small, but luckily with a lot of dremeling, I can get it to fit decently. Again, I'm going slowly, taking small bits at a time and testing it on the model and just repeating that process till I get it to fit. I also have to snip off the pins for the original shoulder pad, but that's easy enough to do and then clean it up. After all that, the shoulder pad fits okay-ish and I slap it on the model. Next, it's time to make a decision on the weapons, and I'm back to the Scarab Occult kit. I put the gun together, then have to work out how I'm attaching it. I settle on using Belial's arm and cutting it at the wrist, then attaching the gun and hand from the scarabs. So a little bit of sawing and a little bit of clean up later, the arm is ready to be attached to the body, and then I attach the hand. Time for the other hand. I spent a bit of time looking at choices for this, and in the end I settled on a Kitbash from the Exalted Sorcerer's kit. The arm and hand are too small for a Terminator, so I used Belial's arm, cutting away his sword and attaching the Kitbash in its place. Looking back, I really should have pinned this. It's not broken yet, but I feel like there's a good chance it might break in the future because it's a fairly small joint. If it does, I'll pin it when I fix it. When it came time to settle on a head, I actually came very close to using his hooded head. I do think it gives a good Sorcerer look, but in the end I thought it'd still look too much like Belial, so I went with a head from an Occult Terminator's kit. But I've saved his head for potential use for a different Sorcerer in the future. Prepping the head was easy enough, just had to cut off his neck bulge and flatten that out. Then it was time to attach his headdress. I didn't check how it fitted with the head on before gluing the head, but thankfully it still fit fine and there were no problems. Not really sure what I would have done if there was a problem. And finally I need to fill in the hole on his shoulder where the shield is meant to sit. The shield doesn't look right for what I'm looking for, it screams Loyalist Marine, so I left it out and filled the hole with some Milliput. Now I'm not good at sculpting, I've done this sort of thing maybe 3 times in total in the past, but who cares, I'm only going to learn by doing it. So I grab my rubber sculpting tools and try to make it look so it looks like the cloak folds are continuing down and smoothing it out a bit. I did fail a bit on the smoothing it out part. Once it's painted, it's a fair bit noticeable that it's not as smooth as the rest of the cloak, but that's fine, it still looks decent. And that's the kit bashing finished. Let's get some paint on him. Normally I start from Diabolic Plum for my Thousand Suns, but I decided that since his cloak is the biggest part, I'd start from Tomb King Tan. Honestly, I regret this later. Starting from a darker colours means I don't have to be as careful to get my brush into the deepest shadowed parts. If it's purple, it doesn't really show that it's not painted. As cream, it's pretty clear if you've missed a spot. But it's no big deal, just something to consider if you're following along at home. Enough of the rambling though, the first colour I used was Resplendent Red for his tabard. Then onto Diabolic Plum for his armour. I should mention that I was playing with the lighting in the camera throughout this video. I'm still struggling to get it to a point where I'm happy with it, and I actually end up with a new camera at the end. Let me know what you think of the new camera at the end. I do think it's a decent improvement. Then it's black for the tubes, his sword and dagger sheath, the joins on his knees, elbows, that sort of thing. I also painted his tactical rock to match the bases I used for my Thousand Suns while I was at it. Then with leather brown I did his belt, the straps on his sword sheath, and the cords holding his cloak. Next for his weapons I break out Death Metal. I still really like this. It's such a dark metallic colour and it's a great contrast against the gold trim, and the runes really pop against it. Then it's the step everyone loves when painting Thousand Suns, the trim. Since this is Kitbash, there isn't as much trim as normal, but still a decent amount. It takes a little while because I'm trying to be at least a little bit careful. Then I break out Ancient Stone to do the lines on his headdress. I did just realise I should point out that I'm not adding the time for the kit bashing to the painting time. At the end of the video I'll include both times, the time for the painting and the time for the kit bashing, but for right now the time you see on the screen is just painting time. If you've watched my videos before, you'll recognise this step, time for touch-ups. When I'm doing the base coating, while I'm being a bit careful, I'm still trying to do it in decent time, so I end up making some mistakes, and this is the step where I fix them. It's really a personal thing, but I find for myself it's quicker to be a bit quicker blocking everything in, and then fixing the mistakes later, rather than trying to make zero mistakes while I'm blocking everything in. Time for shades. The first shade is Purple Tone for all the armour parts. Make sure to push it around and try to avoid any pooling. If you miss some pooling, for whatever reason, don't stress, you can fix it up during the highlighting steps. Then Magenta Tone on the tabard. I go back and forth on using shades on cloth. I don't think they work well for cloth. Even on this model I used a shade on the tabard but didn't use one on the cloak. I can't even keep it consistent when I'm painting a single model. And the final shade is Strong Tone for the golds and browns. Once the washes are dry, it's time for my favourite part, the highlighting. I break out Angelic Red to start work on the tabard. I'm focusing on picking out the raised parts and parts facing upwards, any parts that would be catching the light, doing it in smaller areas as I move down the model into parts that would be more in shadow. Then Legendary Red for the next step. I'm working within the areas I established in the previous step, just in smaller areas focusing towards the edges and the more raised parts. And then I finish it off with Sacred Scarlet, once again working within the already established parts just in smaller areas, mostly an edge highlight and the very tips of the most raised parts. Then it's time to work on the purples, starting with Magecast Magenta to establish the highlights. Again, I'm focusing on the raised parts and the parts facing upwards, leaving the shadows and the deeper parts the darker colour. Warlock Magenta is next, working with the areas established in the previous step, but in smaller areas. While I'm doing that, if you're enjoying the video, why not give it a like, and if you want to see more from me, hit that subscribe button. I'm a very small channel and every like and subscription really helps. Spellbound Fuchsia is next to continue the highlights, especially on his back where the light would be hitting. And finally it's Enchanted Pink, which is mostly used for an edge highlight and to pick out the very tips of the raised parts. Next I hit the eyes with white, and then using the white really thin down, I let it flow into the runes on the gun. Just a note here, I forgot to do the runes on the sword. I fix that up later and I'll show that briefly later, but you should definitely do it while doing the runes on the gun and the eyes. With Warp Lightning Contrast, I go over the eyes and the runes to start the glow effect. Then with Rainforest, I do a small dash on the middle of the eyes and the very middle of the runes. Take your time with this, the details are very small and it's easy to mess them up. If you do mess them up, don't stress, hit it with the contrast and try again. To highlight the brown on the belt and straps, I use Paratrooper Tan. For small details like this, I just do one layer of highlights. They don't need more than that, and you don't want to take attention away from the rest of the model anyway. With Death Reaper, I do the highlights on the blacks. This paint's from the Too Thin Coats range. Since Army Paint had discontinued Necromancer Cloak, this is the best really dark grey I've found. I also block in the gems with Death Reaper during this step. Then to continue the gems, it's Pharaoh Guard. I put this on the bottom half of the gems where the light would be exiting the gem. Then it's Aqua Alchemy inside the previous step in a smaller area, again towards the bottom of the gem. To finish it off, it's white, with a tiny dot at the top of the gems and a slightly smaller dot at the bottom where the light is exiting. This is where I noticed I forgot the runes on the sword and I fixed that. I won't go through the steps again, they're the same as the gun and eyes, and if you're smarter than me, you would have done this during that step. Now it's time to work on the cloak. I start with skeleton bone to establish the highlights. I'm leaving the deepest parts and the parts facing downwards alone and hitting most of the rest of it. The cloak is a big feature on this guy, so take your time and make sure it looks good. If someone's looking at the model from behind, there isn't really much else they'll be seeing. Next, it's ancient stone, working inside the areas I established previously, just in smaller areas, focusing towards the top and the raised parts that would be catching the light. Boney Spikes is the next step, once again working in smaller areas towards the top and the higher points. If you're sick of hearing me say that, imagine how it feels saying it 20 times in a video. Someone needs to come up with a new way for me to explain the same thing. Pale sand finishes off the cloak, mostly an edge highlight, picking out the most raised parts and the parts towards the top of the model, like on the shoulder. Time to highlight the gold. I start with bright gold and work around the model, picking out the raised parts and the parts facing upwards. Also, this is where the new camera kicked in. Let me know if you notice a difference. Then with Mithril, I do edge highlights, only picking out the parts facing upwards that would reflect the most light. I couldn't decide what I wanted to do for the sword blade. I'm still not totally happy with what I settled on, but let's see how it came out, and you can give me your opinions in the comments. So I started with Cobalt Metal for a blue tint on the blade. Then I grabbed royal blue and watered it down a lot to the point it was basically a glaze, and glazed that over the blade to give even more of a blue tint. Then with really watered down black, I added a dark spot down the middle of the top of the blade. Not sure why, it's what I felt at the time, and honestly I think it looks pretty good, and adds some nice detail to the blade. The final step is the fire on his tactical rock. Normally for my Thousand Suns I give them green flames, but these flames are coming up from the base and I do lava bases, so I decided these aren't the green magical flames that my Thousand Suns summon, instead it's flames being created by the lava, so normal colour flames it is. And I start with Impish Rouge. This is because the pink covers better than yellow and it gives a really nice base to build the yellow up from. Then Daemonic Yellow. You can see how well it covers over the pink and how the pink helps it pop nicely. It only needs one coat, where if I went straight over the black parts, it would have needed at least 3 or 4 coats. Then Molten Lava towards the top of the flames where it's starting to cool. And Resplendent Red even higher on the flames. And then finally black for the very tips where it's starting to turn to smoke. And we're done! A Sorcerer in Terminator Armour, ready to join my army and lead my Terminators to victory. Once I paint the Terminators anyway. I think he came out great. I'm really not great at kit bashing, but I'm happy with the result I got here, and practice makes perfect. In total it took a bit less than 4.5 hours to paint, which is actually surprisingly quick for my Thousand Suns. I expected him to at least take another hour or two. Then a bit less than an hour and a half for the kit bashing, which is also pretty good. So in total, a bit less than 6 hours to kit bash and paint for a model that I think will be a standout on the tabletop and just look awesome when he's leading his Terminators once they're painted. I hope this video has given you ideas for your own Terminator Sorcerer, whether it's kit bashing one or the painting side. If you've watched this long, surely you've enjoyed the video, so why not give it a like, and while you're there, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more work from me. Thanks for watching, catch you in the next video.